All right, thank you. So we're up to Friday. Appreciate all of you joining all week. I know we have had small numbers, but really glad that it's been consistently the same people, and that's been cool to see. So thanks for joining us. And so on Monday, we talked about our theme verse, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. We talked about him being king, even though a lot of people just view him as this soft, cuddly teddy bear, but he's actually the king of the universe who sits on his throne, and he's been given dominion and glory and a kingdom, and his kingdom will never pass away. And so that was kind of what we talked about on Monday. And then we talked about the crown, right? And then on Tuesday, A stood for authority. We saw him calm the storm. We saw his disciples cry out, don't you care that we're going to drown? And he proved that he does care and that he's in control. And then on Wednesday, we talked about R stood for remember. You see, Jehoshaphat, he had done nothing wrong, and yet armies were coming to attack him. And even though he'd been trying to do the right thing, not only was he not doing anything wrong, he was actively trying to do right. He was trying to do good. And but remember, when he cried out to God, the first thing he did was spoke of God's kingship. You who are enthroned in the heavens, right? The one who is enthroned is a king, and that's where Jehoshaphat's confidence was. And they praised God before, during, and after. And it wasn't that they didn't have to do anything, right? I mean, even though the battle belongs to the Lord, it wasn't that they didn't have to do anything. They had to go, they had to face their enemy, and they had to stand there. But trust
I like
God
that
to bring the
song.
victory. What was that?
I like that song. The battle belongs to the
That's
Lord.
right.
And we own
That's
it.
right. Do you? Nice. And that's the one that Tim chose for that day, right? Even though we hadn't planned that. And then yesterday we talked about E, which stood for eternity. And we talked about Paul. And this is where I'm going to ask you for some help to give me some of these answers. This might be a good time to really pay attention because you might see these in the Zonk questions today, possibly, potentially. But where was Paul when he wrote to Timothy?
Oh, yeah.
He was at. He was
Incarcerated.
That's right. Incarcerated, in jail, however you want to phrase it. Remember, Paul was in jail. And if anybody who had it, we think would have had a right to complain or to be mad at God or upset or woe is me or any of that stuff, I mean, he's in prison for preaching the gospel. He's not in prison because he did something wrong. He's in prison for preaching the gospel. So he was in jail.
just doing
And
something
what was going to happen? That's right. And what was going to happen to him? How was the story going to end for Paul? That's right, Tyler, right? The head is coming off. And he knows it. And he knows that's how he's going to die, and he knows it's coming. Where was everyone else? When all this was going wrong, where was everyone else? Exactly. They had left him, right? Paul was abandoned. He was deserted. And again, just imagine how bad you could feel for yourself, right? But where was his hope? Where was his hope? The Lord will rescue me from every evil deed and bring me safely where? Tyler's pointing to it. Where was God going to bring him? Yeah, his hope is in the Lord, more specifically than heaven. The Lord will bring me safely into his heavenly what? His excellent, Eddie, right? Into his heavenly kingdom. Because remember, that kingdom that God has is never going to pass away. That's what you see in Daniel 7, the passage we started with this week. It's an everlasting dominion, and it will never pass away. And that's where Paul's hope was. Now, the one thing we didn't talk about, but you might want to listen to this for Zonk today, just an idea, just a hint, is this. When people suffer, they typically have one of two reactions when it comes to God. When people go through a hard time, what is one of the reactions that they have with God? They're kind of two opposite reactions. Yeah, why me? That's kind of what leads to this, actually. They either turn, fill in the blank. They either turn away from God or toward him, exactly, right? They either turn away from God or they turn toward him. And that's typically how people respond. They either turn away from God because they're mad and they can't believe God would let them go through this, and they're upset and they're angry and they're hurt, and they turn away, or they turn toward. And that's a choice for every one of you. I don't care whether you're 8 years old or whether you're 16 years old. Every one of us has to face that choice. And Paul faced it, right? I mean, Paul literally lost his life, but he turned towards God. So that's just your review, and also a review of some of the Zonk questions as well. Well, today, just kind of two thoughts as we kind of close up the week. What is a command? What's a command? What is a command?
In order?
In order, right? Exactly. It's something that you are specifically told to do. You know, a command is something you are told to do. So I'm going to look I'm going to pull up the screen, and oops. I want you to notice these two verses. One is in the book of Psalms, and one is in Hosea. And the first one says this: "Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us." Right? Do you see that there's a command there? That command says to pour out your heart before God, to trust in him at all times. Those are commands. You know, sometimes let me rephrase it this way. How many of you have had times where you've been going through something, but you didn't want to tell anybody? Okay, think about it, right? How many times have you've been going through something, but you don't want to talk to anybody? Why don't you want to talk to them about it? You can give me some answers for this. Either type it or unmute yourself and say it. Why do we not want to go to people to talk to them about things?
Ridiculed.
Ridicule.
All right, we don't want them to worry. Ridicule, we don't want to be made fun of, right? We don't think that they will care, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many of you ever, what was that, John?
I agree.
Yeah,
Angry.
we're angry, we're scared, right? How many times do we not go to people because we don't want to be a burden to them? I mean, have you ever felt like that, where like, I don't want to be a burden to this person? And yet, sometimes maybe we transfer that to God, right? That, well, I don't want to burden him. You know, I don't know if he's going to care. I don't want to burden him. And yet you see in Scripture, he commands us to do it. And in Hosea, what's interesting to me about this verse in Hosea, the second verse on there, is that this is actually God rebuking his people. Like, they're actually being disciplined partially for this. He says, "They do not cry to me from the heart, but they wail upon their beds." Now think about that for a minute. They don't cry to me from the heart, but they wail upon their beds. You know, how many people, you don't have to admit this out loud if you don't want to, but how many people in this Zoom call have cried themselves to sleep at some point, right? You've laid in your bed and cried. And God is saying to his people, they wail upon their beds, and they don't cry to me from their heart. See, he wants us to go to him. Remember, they're being rebuked for that. They're like in trouble for that. And are any of you guys fans of like the Andy Griffith Show or Leave It to Beaver, like old school black and white TV shows? Anybody watch those? Raise your hand or thumbs up if you've ever watched those.
No.
Yeah, I have.
No, all right. Well, there's some classics, but you know, the thing in those old TV shows is, you know, there's always it's usually a boy, right? Either Father Knows Best or Leave It to Beaver or Andy Griffith Show. There's a boy or boys. And what happens is some dilemma comes up, right? Some problem comes up. And rather than going to their father or another adult, they try to solve it on their own, right? And what happens when they try to fix it on their own, do you think, in those shows?
It's messed up.
It gets messed up even more.
Exactly, right? It gets messed up even more, right? It makes it even worse. And then the father comes in and the father helps solve it. That's right, they fail and so on. And then the father comes in and solves it. And you know, you can just kind of feel the heart of the father where it's like, why didn't you just come to me in the first place, right? Now we've got this big mess because you wouldn't just come to me in the first place. And I wonder if God isn't sometimes like that, right? Why didn't you just come to me in the first place? You wailed upon your bed rather than crying to me from your heart. Yes, John.
I've watched Dennis is a Menace.
Dennis the Menace. Yep, that could be another one. All right. Yeah, that's another old school show.
Mhm.
But I just wonder if God isn't like that sometimes. Like, why don't they just cry to me? Why don't they just cry to me from their hearts rather than sitting there wailing upon their beds? But I want to close. I want to close with one last passage out of Philippians chapter 4. How many of you have ever wished you knew the secret to something? Have you ever wished you knew the secret to something? Man, I wish that I knew the secret too. You want to type it in or say it out loud?
Secret
I'm
to-
curious to know. What do you wish you knew the secret to? You can unmute yourself or say it. You wish you knew the secret to your brother, Daniel? Eddie? What is the secret?
Mine was the secret how to get my dog to listen.
What is the secret to getting your dog to listen? That would be a good one. What is the secret to understanding your brother, right? What is the secret to him? What is the secret to keeping my students quiet during class? What's the secret to success?
There
What's
is
the
no
secret
secret.
to curing all diseases? Other things? Other things you desperately wish you knew the secret to? Well, you know, I kind of thought about this, and that's a good one too, Adam, right? I thought about this, so I wanted answers. I want to know what other people want to know the secret to. So I went where we all go for answers, which is where? Where do we all go for answers?
Say good.
A Google.
Google.
To Google, right? Well, ideally to God. Begins with the same letter, but most people go to Google, right? And so I went to Google. And you know how there's that predictive typing thing where you start typing something in, and then it starts giving you answers, you know? And those things that come up are the ones that most other people have searched for. And sometimes it can depend on what area of the country you're in or area of the world. But those are the ones that other people are searching for. So I went to Google and I started typing in, what is the secret to? And the answers were in this order, the top 7. What is the secret to life? Right? Most people want to know what the secret to life is. What is the secret to love? Right? How many people would like to know? How many guys would like to know the secret to love? Right? The third one kind of surprised me. Maybe it was because I was in Florida. Maybe this is more common down there when I did this. Never thought about this one, but what is the secret to winning slot tournaments? Right? For all those people that played Zonk when they were younger and became compulsive gamblers, they're asking Google, what is the secret to winning slot tournaments? What is the secret to the universe? Right? We're kind of back to the big questions. A lot of big questions: life, love, the universe. Then this one, this would be a great one. I wish I knew this secret. What is the secret to soft cookies? Right? Soft cookies. Anybody want to know that one? All right. And apparently on Google, that's one of the most searched for secrets. What is the secret to success? That's what Phil asked as well. That was number 6. And the last one, this is another good one. What is the secret to movie theater popcorn? Right? Because no matter how you make it at home, it's never quite the same as when you get it at the theater drenched in butter. It's just not.
That's me.
This is what people want to know. And I came across an article. There were 2 old men in England, in Britain, and they were turning 111 last year. Same day, Britain's oldest men. And of course, what do you think they were asked about? What do you think they asked them in this interview?
Secret of long life.
Secret of long life, right? What is the secret to living to 111? And their answer, and I thought this one, yeah, how they got that old. I like this answer. The one 111-year-old said, the secret to a long life is to avoid dying. Think about that.
I think it's
Response. And the second guy chimed in. He agreed with that, but then he also said that porridge is helpful, like oatmeal. So if you want to live to 111, avoid dying and eat lots of porridge, because apparently that's it, right? So people want to know the secrets to all kinds of things. But one of the things that a lot of people want to know is, what is the secret to contentment? What is the secret to happiness, right? Because I think most of us would like to be happy. I think most of us don't always feel happy. But if we knew that there was a secret to being happy, we'd want to know it. And there's a word in the Bible, and it's called contentment, content or contentment. And if you look that up, again, use Google, what is contentment? One of the definitions is in a state of peaceful happiness, right? What is the secret to being in a state of peaceful happiness? And that's where we come to this passage this morning. Well, I said I'll try to keep this short. This is what Paul says, and this is one of those verses. If you ask young men who grow up in the church, who grow up in Christian homes, Christian families, Christian schools, Christian whatever, Adam mentioned youth group before, a lot of young men will say their favorite verse is Philippians 4:13. But I think it has a different context than we often use for it. So here it is. This is Paul writing, and this time this is not the time when Paul is in jail and he's going to be executed, but he's under house arrest. He can't leave where he's at. So as for I have learned to be content, a state of peaceful happiness, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. Now the thing is, when people are in need, they might not always feel like they're in a state of peaceful happiness. But Paul says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry. Now, see, you and I, we don't really deal with hunger, right? We live in a country where we are incredibly blessed with more than enough food, right? But for them, it was a realistic thing. Whether he's well-fed or hungry, he doesn't just mean hungry because he hasn't eaten since, like 9:30 this morning? They're talking about hunger because there's not enough food. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. See, a lot of times when people quote that verse about I can do all this, I can do everything through him who strengthens me, or he who gives me strength, they're talking about, they use it like a, like before you go into a game and you're like you're pumping yourself up, like we can do this, we got this, guys, we got this. And guys, we can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. And we use that verse in a sense of achievement, right? Something we want to accomplish, something we want to do, and we say, you know what, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. But that's not the context of this verse. In this verse, Paul is specifically talking about being content. I can be content through any and every situation, through him who gives me strength. And I want to ask you this morning, see, when we're anxious about stuff, when we're worried about stuff, we're really not content, right? Anxiety means we want something to be the way that it isn't right now, or we're afraid that the future won't be what we want it to be. And we lack happiness and we lack contentment. But Paul says in this passage, I can do all things. I know the secret. Right? Do any of you want to know the secret to happiness? Do any of you want to know the secret to contentment, to being okay with whatever is happening, and the secret to being okay with whatever will happen in your life? From now, you don't have to Google it. You don't have to Google that question.
That's right.
Paul made it clear, I can do all things. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. And that's really what I want to leave you with at the end of this week. Number one, call out to God. He wants you to come to him. You're not a burden to him. And number two, no matter what you're going through, have been through, will go through, you can find contentment through him who gives you strength. And ultimately, I think that's also rooted in the knowledge of this, right? In the knowledge of this. That I don't need to be anxious. I don't need to worry. I don't need to be afraid, because he's king. And whatever I need to face, he's going to enable me to face. He's going to give me the strength to do that. So I hope as we go forward that you don't just look at God as this kind of weak but nice teddy bear, but that you look at him really as the king of the universe. And why do I need to fear?
Right.
So those are just some closing thoughts for today. Any questions or comments on that?
Good.
Whenever you hear people use that verse, remind them it's about contentment.